For me personally, remembering is a key quality because it's something that I learned. Somebody asked me, tell me when you were happiest. And this was at a time where I was struggling. I was at my worst. I never thought I'd be in such a difficult place. And somebody's asking me to remember when I was happiest. And so I struggled with that. And finally, I remembered, I had a memory of a time when I sat on this elephant when I was in India. I was only 6 years old. My family was returning to India. And I was on this big elephant, and where we're from in India, it's South India, where they used elephants at the time to clear some land for farming. We were a farming village. And this elephant, they let me rise up on the elephant. And as I sat on this elephant, man, I felt so connected. I felt like I belonged to this elephant. As I remembered, I immediately connected to what it was like to walk through the fields, the sugarcane fields and all of the different areas of that village. And I felt like my uncles and my aunts and my cousins, they all looked at me as though I belonged. They looked at me like I had something to contribute. They had a confidence about me that I didn't even have yet about myself. I suddenly remembered all of these things sitting on that elephant. And I remembered that when I started to reflect on it. But I want to tell you why I remember that so clearly. Because I wasn't feeling that way here in the States. When my family came to the States, what we remember and what I remembered was seeing the hostility that my family dealt with. We moved from New York City up to Rochester, New York. This was 1972 and 73. We started in the Bronx, in Queens, and these areas. The Bronx was literally burning, in the 70s. And then we came upstate, and we thought it would be a little different. People said there were jobs. Well, it turned out jobs were only going to people who were not people of color, who were only to the white people in the community. Right? And there was a big challenge going on at that time. And that Saul Alinsky came to the city and was helping people of color actually take employment back in Rochester. And apparently, when this actually happened, it actually transitioned as we arrived in 72 and 73 and 74 in Rochester, New York. But the issue was people were unhappy about it. So the hostility was more, you know what I mean? So we were getting all kinds of stuff. And I didn't really realize it. I'm only 4 or 5 years old. I don't know this context that I'm describing you to today. But I did know in certain moments. I knew, for example, when my father and I were walking down the street and his hand would squeeze. That was his signal. When my father's hand squeezed a little tighter, that meant stay with him, he's going to walk a little faster. And as we walked by, whoever it was, I could see him settle down a little bit, and we'd be calmer. And I'd look back to see who it was or what they were doing, and sometimes they were laughing, sometimes they were pointing, sometimes they had angry faces. I saw authorities treating my family, even on that trip, making fun of the way we talked, the way we dressed, our accents, our clothes, So the feeling inside of me was, what's going to happen to me? When is it going to be me next? When's my turn? Because I would watch my father try to keep his cool and keep me safe. Well, at the same time, I didn't know how I was going to handle it. I didn't think I could keep that cool. I didn't think that I could handle these indignities this way. So when I started school, I started experiencing it, and so I handled it my own way. It turned out that wasn't the way the school liked or appreciated. They didn't see my passion or my frustration, in the way that I did. They didn't hear it. So slowly, over time, that school didn't work out, and another school didn't work out, and then we found some accommodations where my family's needs might get met. But we struggled with this for years. And then just to fast forward a little bit, my sense of safety started reducing dramatically. I didn't feel like anybody could keep me safe. In my own school, in my own home, in my own environment, my own community, the sidewalk rejected me, So I was going to have my own back. I was going to have to take care of my own protection. So what that meant was even my family couldn't be trusted. And so that's what I started to wonder. Maybe they were sick of me. Maybe they didn't want me anymore. And I started to look for and find evidence of that in their discussions at night, in their angry, upset moments, with me. I started to incorporate all that. They were actually very loving. There's not one moment I can guarantee you that my parents dropped their love for me. But I could never feel it. I started to wonder if they were poisoning my food, and I started being convinced of it. And I stopped eating our food. And I stopped trusting even people who are associated with them. So this sense of isolation continued, and I tried to feel better by using drugs. I tried to feel better by getting involved in fights. I tried to feel better by getting with a new crowd. I tried to feel better by not being Indian anymore. For a whole year, I was Puerto Riqueño in this one particular area. Any Puerto Riqueños here? Proud Puerto Riqueños? No? Not yet? Okay, good. So I changed my identity. I tried so many things. All the ways I tried to soothe myself from these traumas, never worked. We call them almost working tools, These are the tools that almost worked. We turned to them all the time. I was soothing myself with fire, and I didn't know I could just step out. It didn't feel like I ever could. So I tried to kill myself at 15, and my father and my mother, we were Indian. We didn't reach out to a lot of people during this time. We didn't want to tell people what was going on. We were the first ones to come to this country to be an experiment, if you will, for the rest of my family. We wanted to have people come and learn how to be here. And my father, I'm there. He turns to another man finally in a church, and he says to him, my son's in the hospital. He just tried to kill himself. He's on drugs. I don't know what to do. And this other man said two words that changed the course of my family's history. He said, "Me too. Me too." His son was going through a similar struggle. He just said he's going to introduce my father to other families who are organizing that area to share their stories and support each other. And guess what? Also support their children and their young people in that community to start what they had first envisioned would be a center, a little recovery center to support the students in that particular school. And so they renovated an old horse barn, threw a bunch of couches and ping pong tables and pool tables, and there was a soda machine. That was apparently our revenue source. And this place became a place where I went before school, after school, evenings, weekends, holidays, and I connected with other students. I went there thinking that I would always have to have my backup. They didn't look like me, talk like me, sound like me, anything like me, And like Stephanie said, I had hair down to my waist, way over my eyes. You couldn't see me unless you kind of pulled it apart, I was 100 pounds soaking wet, same height as I am today. Really struggling, And when the way they looked at me was the way I remembered that look. It's back on that elephant. I got to drop my guard for the first time in a long time. Never thought I'd feel that. So when I dropped my guard, it was a risk. I'd taken a lot of risks. Michael Nerney probably told you about that yesterday, right? So this was one of those risks that even with that other experience, I could still, from seeking safety quite quickly to taking risks. Guess what? Tool for thriving, number 2, risk-taking. First one is remembering. Second is risk-taking.